Have you ever wondered if something as simple as the drink in your morning cup could influence some of the most fascinating systems inside your body? Not by performing miracles, not by curing disease, but by interacting with biology in ways scientists are still working to understand. For years, researchers believed beverages were little more than sources of hydration, caffeine, or calories. But over the past 2 decades, evidence has uncovered a much more intriguing story. Certain naturally occurring compounds found in everyday drinks appear to communicate with our cells, influence inflammation, support metabolic health, and may even affect the tiny biological environments where stem cells live. Even more surprising, researchers studying cancer biology have discovered that some of these compounds may influence how tumors interact with blood vessels and their surrounding environment. These findings have generated enormous excitement, but also enormous misunderstanding. Today, we're separating scientific fact from internet fiction, because while headlines often claim that one drink can regrow stem cells or starve cancer, the real science is far more fascinating and far more useful. By the end of this video, you'll understand why researchers are studying one particular beverage so intensely, what human studies actually suggest, where the evidence is still developing, and how this knowledge may fit into a healthy lifestyle aimed at supporting long-term health. And one discovery near the end may completely change how you think about your daily cup. For decades, many people viewed beverages through a simple lens. Water was healthy, sugary drinks were unhealthy. Coffee either helped or harmed depending on who you asked. Tea was considered calming. Beyond that, there wasn't much to discuss. But scientists began noticing something unexpected. People from very different cultures who regularly consume certain plant-based beverages often experience better long-term health outcomes than researchers initially expected. Of course, these populations also differed in diet, exercise, sleep, stress, healthcare, and countless other factors. That meant no one could conclude that a single beverage explained everything. Still, the pattern kept appearing. Researchers became curious. What exactly was inside these drinks? The answer wasn't vitamins. It wasn't minerals. It wasn't even caffeine. Instead, attention shifted toward thousands of naturally occurring compounds known as polyphenols. These molecules are produced by plants as part of their own survival strategy. They help defend against environmental stress, ultraviolet light, insects, and disease. When humans consume foods and beverages rich in these compounds, scientists have observed that they don't simply pass through the body unnoticed. Many appear to interact with our biology in surprisingly complex ways. However, that's not the most interesting part. Researchers also discovered that different polyphenols don't all behave the same way. Some influence inflammation, others may support healthy blood vessel function, some appear to affect how our cells respond to oxidative stress, others seem to communicate with the trillions of microbes living inside the gut. This is where one beverage has attracted extraordinary scientific attention: green tea. For centuries, green tea has been consumed throughout Asia as part of everyday life. Only recently have modern laboratories begun exploring why it has become one of the most studied beverages in nutritional science. The reason centers on one remarkable compound called EGCG, short for epigallocatechin gallate. Although its name sounds complicated, its potential role is easier to understand. Imagine every cell in your body constantly receiving messages. Some signals tell cells to repair themselves. Others encourage inflammation. Some promote growth. Others tell damaged cells that their job is finished. Health depends on maintaining balance among all these signals. Research suggests EGCG may interact with several of these communication pathways simultaneously. That doesn't mean it overrides biology. It doesn't act like a magic switch. Instead, scientists believe it may gently influence multiple systems involved in maintaining normal cellular function. This idea represents a major shift in nutrition science. Instead of searching for one powerful compound that changes everything, researchers increasingly recognize that small influences across many biological systems may accumulate over years. And this brings us to stem cells. Few topics generate more excitement or more confusion. Stem cells are often described as the body's repair cells. While that's a useful simplification, the reality is much more nuanced. Throughout adulthood, your body maintains populations of stem cells in specialized locations known as niches. These cells help replace worn out tissues, contribute to healing, and support normal maintenance in organs ranging from the skin to the intestine and the blood. The remarkable thing isn't that stem cells exist, it's that many remain active throughout life. Unfortunately, aging affects these cells. Research indicates that stem cell function may gradually decline with age. Inflammation, chronic metabolic stress, poor sleep, smoking, physical inactivity, and unhealthy dietary patterns have all been associated with changes that may reduce the efficiency of these repair systems. Scientists are intensely interested in discovering lifestyle factors that help maintain healthier stem cell environments over time. Notice the wording: maintain, support, preserve. These are very different ideas from dramatically creating new stem cells or regenerating entire organs. Yet headlines often blur those distinctions. That's where misunderstanding begins. Several laboratory studies have suggested that compounds found in green tea may influence pathways involved in stem cell biology. Researchers have observed effects on cellular signaling, oxidative stress, and inflammatory processes under experimental conditions. These findings are scientifically exciting, but translating laboratory observations into real-world human outcomes requires much more evidence. That process takes years, sometimes decades, and this is exactly why responsible scientists remain careful. The laboratory helps generate hypotheses. Human clinical research tests whether those hypotheses actually improve health. Those are two different stages of discovery. Yet the real story becomes even more interesting when researchers began asking another question. Could the same biological pathways involved in healthy tissues also influence diseases characterized by uncontrolled cell growth? This led scientists into one of the most fascinating areas of modern medicine: angiogenesis. Most people have never heard the word, yet every person depends on it. Angiogenesis simply refers to the growth of new blood vessels. Without it, wounds couldn't heal, children couldn't grow, muscles couldn't adapt after exercise, healthy pregnancy wouldn't be possible. In other words, angiogenesis is essential for life. The goal isn't to stop it, the goal is balance. Too little angiogenesis can interfere with healing. Too much may contribute to certain diseases. This balance became one of the central ideas explored by physician and researcher Dr. William Li. His work helped popularize the concept that foods may interact with biological systems involved in maintaining healthy blood vessel function. Importantly, research in this area does not suggest that drinking green tea treats cancer. Cancer is an extraordinarily complex group of diseases requiring evidence-based medical care. However, scientists continue investigating whether dietary patterns rich in plant-based foods may support the body's normal regulatory systems that influence inflammation, metabolism, immunity, and blood vessel biology. That distinction matters enormously. One reflects established medical treatment. The other reflects ongoing nutrition research. And when those two ideas become confused, misinformation spreads. Interestingly, researchers have also found that green tea is far from unique. Coffee contains hundreds of biologically active compounds. Cocoa contains flavonols. Berries provide anthocyanins. Pomegranates supply elagitannins. Many herbs and spices contain their own unique phytochemicals. Nature rarely relies on one superstar molecule. Instead, whole dietary patterns appear to create overlapping biological effects. This is one reason scientists increasingly focus less on individual quote-unquote superfoods and more on long-term eating habits. But researchers later discovered something surprising. The way your body responds to these compounds depends not only on what you drink, but also on who you are. Two people can consume the same cup of green tea and process its compounds differently. Why? Because of the gut microbiome. Inside your digestive system live trillions of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms. Far from being passive passengers, many help transform plant compounds into entirely new molecules. Some individuals produce larger amounts of beneficial metabolites than others. This means that identical foods can produce different biological responses among different people. Scientists call this personalized nutrition. It's one of the fastest growing fields in medicine. Rather than asking whether a food is universally good or bad, researchers increasingly ask a more sophisticated question. Who benefits most? Under what circumstances? And why? Those questions are reshaping how we think about nutrition itself. Instead of chasing miracle ingredients, future healthcare may focus on matching dietary patterns to individual biology. Yet another discovery adds to this fascinating picture. Exercise appears to amplify many of the same biological pathways that researchers study in nutrition. Physical activity improves insulin sensitivity. It supports healthy circulation. It influences inflammation. It promotes mitochondrial function. It even affects signaling molecules involved in tissue maintenance. In other words, the beverage itself may not be the headline. The combination of healthy habits may be. And that changes everything. Because the most impressive health outcomes rarely come from a single food, drink, supplement, or habit. They emerge from consistent patterns repeated over years. Still, one major question remains unanswered. If green tea and similar beverages contain biologically active compounds, how much is actually useful? Is more always better, or can too much become counterproductive? The answer surprised researchers, and it may completely change the way you think about health supplements. The answer begins with one of the oldest principles in biology: balance. When scientists first identified EGCG and other plant compounds in green tea, excitement spread quickly. Laboratory experiments showed these molecules interacting with pathways involved in oxidative stress, inflammation, and cellular signaling. It wasn't long before concentrated supplements appeared on store shelves, promising to deliver these compounds in far larger amounts than anyone could obtain from drinking tea alone. At first glance, the logic seems straightforward. If a little is good, then more must be better. But biology rarely works that way. Researchers soon learned that nutrients and bioactive compounds often follow what scientists call a dose-response curve. At moderate levels, a compound may support normal biological processes. At excessively high levels, those same compounds may no longer behave in the same way. In fact, some studies have raised concerns that very high-dose green tea extracts, particularly when taken in supplement form or on an empty stomach, may increase the risk of liver injury in susceptible individuals. These findings don't mean green tea itself is unsafe. Millions of people around the world have consumed it as part of traditional diets for centuries. Rather, they illustrate an important lesson. Whole foods and beverages often behave differently than highly concentrated extracts. This is one reason nutrition researchers consistently encourage people to focus on dietary patterns instead of isolated compounds. Nature packages nutrients together for a reason. Green tea doesn't contain only EGCG. It contains dozens of catechins, amino acids like L-theanine, small amounts of caffeine, minerals, and hundreds of other naturally occurring molecules that may interact in ways scientists are still exploring. And this is where another fascinating discovery emerges. One of green tea's most unique characteristics isn't what it contains individually, but how those compounds may work together. Take L-theanine, for example. Unlike caffeine, which increases alertness by blocking adenosine receptors in the brain, L-theanine appears to influence neurotransmitters associated with relaxation and attention. Research suggests that when modest amounts of caffeine and L-theanine are consumed together, some people experience improved focus with fewer feelings of jitteriness than caffeine alone. This combination has become one of the most studied examples of nutritional synergy. Instead of pushing the brain in only one direction, these compounds may create a more balanced state of alertness. That may help explain why many people describe green tea as providing calm energy, rather than the sharper stimulations sometimes associated with coffee. Of course, responses vary widely. Genetics, caffeine sensitivity, sleep quality, medications, and habitual intake all influence how someone experiences caffeinated beverages. Still, scientists continue investigating why this combination appears unique. But the story doesn't end with the brain. Researchers have also examined how green tea fits into metabolic health. Our metabolism is far more than simply burning calories. It involves an intricate network regulating blood sugar, fat metabolism, hormones, muscle function, and energy production inside nearly every cell. As we age, these systems often become less efficient. Muscle mass gradually declines, insulin sensitivity may decrease, fat distribution changes. Inflammation can become more persistent. These shifts don't happen overnight. They accumulate slowly over years, influenced by genetics, lifestyle, sleep, physical activity, nutrition, stress, and environmental factors. Evidence suggests that dietary patterns rich in minimally processed plant foods are associated with healthier metabolic aging. Green tea may contribute as one component of that larger pattern. Some studies have found modest associations between green tea consumption and improvements in markers related to metabolic health, although results are not always consistent across different populations. Why the mixed findings? Because nutrition research is incredibly complex. Unlike testing a single medication under tightly controlled conditions, food is consumed within an entire lifestyle. Someone who drinks green tea regularly may also exercise more, smoke less, sleep better, eat more vegetables, or have different cultural eating habits. Researchers work hard to account for these differences, but no single study can capture every variable. That's why the strongest conclusions come from looking at the total body of evidence rather than any individual headline. And this leads to one of the biggest misconceptions in health science. People often search for one perfect food, one perfect supplement, one perfect drink. But longevity research points in a different direction. The world's healthiest aging populations don't appear to rely on miracle ingredients. Instead, they consistently practice remarkably ordinary habits. They eat diverse, plant-rich diets. They stay physically active throughout life. They maintain social connections. They prioritize sleep. They manage stress. They avoid smoking. They remain mentally engaged. The remarkable results emerge from the combination. Green tea, when included, becomes one small piece of a much larger picture. Yet researchers discovered something else that deserves attention. Healthy aging isn't only about living longer. It's about maintaining function. Imagine reaching your 80s while remaining physically active, mentally sharp, socially connected, and independent. Scientists often refer to this as extending health span rather than simply lifespan. That distinction changes how we evaluate nutrition. Instead of asking whether a food adds years, researchers increasingly ask whether it helps preserve quality of life. Can it support healthier blood vessels? Can it contribute to metabolic resilience? Can it fit within dietary patterns associated with healthy aging? These questions are far more meaningful than searching for dramatic promises. Interestingly, many of the biological pathways studied in green tea overlap with those activated by exercise. Both appear to influence oxidative stress. Both interact with inflammatory signaling. Both affect mitochondrial health. Both may support healthy endothelial function, which helps blood vessels respond appropriately to changing demands. Neither replaces the other. Instead, they may complement one another. Think of the body as an orchestra rather than a single instrument. Nutrition contributes one section, exercise contributes another. Sleep provides rhythm. Stress management influences tempo. Social relationships add harmony. No single instrument creates the symphony. Health emerges when the entire system works together. This systems-based perspective is becoming increasingly important in modern medicine. Rather than targeting isolated organs, Researchers now recognize that the brain, immune system, gut, muscles, blood vessels, liver, and metabolism communicate continuously. Inflammation in one system may influence another. Gut microbes produce molecules that reach the brain. Muscles release signaling proteins during exercise that affect distant organs. Blood vessels respond to metabolic changes occurring throughout the body. Everything is connected. That understanding helps explain why modest lifestyle improvements across multiple areas often outperform dramatic changes in only one. Now consider what happens over decades. Choosing water instead of sugary beverages, walking 30 minutes most days, eating more colorful fruits and vegetables, adding legumes and whole grains, including tea instead of sugar-sweetened drinks when appropriate, sleeping consistently, managing stress. Individually, each decision seems almost insignificant. Collectively, they may shape the biological environment in which every cell operates. Researchers sometimes describe this as influencing the trajectory of aging, not stopping it, not reversing it, but potentially nudging it toward healthier outcomes. This is where the conversation about stem cells becomes much more realistic and much more hopeful. Scientists are not suggesting that a single drink suddenly creates new stem cells or regenerates organs. Instead, researchers are investigating whether long-term, healthy lifestyle patterns may help maintain the environments that allow normal tissue maintenance and repair to function more effectively as we age. That may sound less dramatic than internet headlines, but it's also far more consistent with what decades of research suggest. Small biological advantages, repeated daily, can accumulate over years. The same principle applies to cardiovascular health, brain health, bone health, metabolic health, and perhaps even healthy aging itself. The challenge is that these changes are nearly invisible from one day to the next. Drink 1 cup of green tea today, and you probably won't notice anything remarkable. Choose healthier habits consistently for 20 years, and the cumulative effects may be far more meaningful. Human biology rewards consistency more than intensity. This may be one of the most valuable lessons longevity science has taught us. There's another important point that often gets overlooked. No food exists in isolation from medical care. If someone has cancer, heart disease, diabetes, or another serious condition, evidence-based treatment remains essential. Nutrition can play a supportive role within an overall care plan, but it is not a substitute for diagnosis, treatment, or guidance from qualified healthcare professionals. Understanding that distinction allows us to appreciate nutrition science without expecting it to accomplish what it was never designed to do. Perhaps that's why the most respected researchers speak with careful optimism. They rarely promise miracles. They discuss probabilities, associations, mechanisms, patterns, accumulating evidence. Those may not sound as exciting as sensational headlines, but they are far more powerful because they reflect how science actually advances. Each carefully conducted study becomes one piece of a much larger puzzle. Over time, that puzzle grows clearer, and today's understanding of nutrition is already dramatically more sophisticated than it was just 20 years ago. We're learning that foods are not merely sources of calories, they carry information. They interact with genes, microbes, hormones, immune cells, blood vessels, and metabolic pathways in ways that scientists continue to uncover. That's an extraordinary realization, not because it promises magic, but because it reminds us that our daily choices participate in an ongoing conversation with our biology. So, is green tea a miracle drink? The evidence says no. Is it a fascinating beverage containing naturally occurring compounds that researchers continue to study for their potential roles in healthy aging, metabolism, vascular health, and cellular function? Absolutely. When enjoyed as part of a balanced lifestyle, it may contribute to dietary patterns associated with better long-term health. And perhaps the most surprising discovery isn't hidden inside a single cup at all. It's the realization that our bodies are remarkably responsive to consistent, everyday habits. The decisions we make today may seem small, brewing a cup of tea instead of reaching for a sugary drink, taking a walk after dinner, choosing whole foods a little more often, sleeping an extra hour, moving our bodies regularly, staying curious, staying connected. None of these choices promises perfection. None guarantees a longer life. But together, they may help create the conditions in which our bodies are better equipped to maintain health as the years pass. That's the true message emerging from modern longevity research. Not that one drink changes everything, but that thousands of small, science informed decisions can gradually shape the way we age. And that's why understanding the science matters.